Hello and welcome to a podcast of the Yakima Symphony Orchestra. Today I'm Jeff Snedeker, and every day I guess I'm Jeff Snedeker. And in most days, and this is our music director all the time, Golan. We're here to talk about an upcoming concert of the Yakima Symphony Orchestra, a concert that will be held Saturday, February 19th at 7:30 p.m. in the Capitol Theater in Yakima, Washington. The title of the concert is Concert Fantastique, which provokes an interesting thematic concept. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you go about deciding on Concert Fantastique? I mean, there's some obvious answers, but you know, how did you go about it?
Well, it started, like many programs, with one piece, you know, being the catalyst, and that was the Symphony Fantastique by Berlioz. And then the question is, well, what are we going to do along with it? And so I started investigating, you know, various fantastic pieces, and you know, there are a few, but one I came across was called Scherzo Fantastique by Branco. And while there are some other more obvious choices, I specifically wanted to do something less known, because you know, we have an organizational endeavor to present to our audience a combination of very well-known, beloved standards, along with some pieces they haven't ever heard before, and continually introducing them to great music. And that's a key point, is great music. You know, there are lots of pieces that one may not have heard before, and it's probably fine that it stays that way. But there are
not so fantastic.
That's right. That's right. But there are other pieces you may not have ever heard of it, or even ever heard of the composer, or in this case, maybe not ever heard of any composer from this particular country.
Right. That's true.
But it's still a great piece.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's, you know, it started with looking for something with that fantastique theme. But once I, you know, found this piece, I investigated it, looked at the score, and heard it, and I think it is a fantastic piece, and therefore it made it onto the program.
Well, it is. I find it to be very charming.
Right.
It's by a Portuguese composer. Now, we don't hear a lot about Portuguese composers.
That's right.
Portugal actually has a pretty substantial history in Western music. The problem is that most of the composers that have, at least famous ones, that have been involved in Portuguese court or associated in some way with, you know, living in Portugal, came from other places. You know, and so it's kind of surprising then that we haven't heard more about, you know, native Portuguese composers, and there are many. We just don't hear a lot about them. You know, there are basically two that we know, at least from history, that we know about. Right? One is Branco. And the other is Jordi, what was it? I have it here. Jordi Vargas Santos. He's the other.
Who was a student of Branco.
Who was a student of Branco. Now, Branco is a composer sort of from the early part of the 20th century, right? Or the first part of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
And was a musicologist. So he had some interest in not only the history of music, but certainly the history of Portuguese music. And was actually kind of important along those lines. But he also was a composer, right? Obviously, he wrote this piece. But this is an early piece of his, right?
Yes, he wrote this piece when he was only 17 years old. It's his first major piece, and he did go on to write several other pieces, but this is really his breakthrough piece. And as you said, I think charming is a perfect word for it. Delightful. You know, it's not the deepest, most introspective piece at all. It's just a delightful fantasy.
Right, and a nice way to start the program, because it sort of draws you in, doesn't hit you over the head.
Exactly.
And I think it's got a very interesting sort of rhythmic component to it. So as people listen to it, my hope is that they'll be delighted, if anything, with the way he sort of plays with the rhythmic aspects of what he does. Very entertaining, very nice opener. The another fantastic piece that we're performing doesn't have fantastique in the title, but it's probably a word that has been used pretty frequently with this concerto. And of course, I'm talking about the Rachmaninoff second piano concerto that we will perform. The soloist will be John Pickett, from Ellensburg, Washington, teaches at Central Washington University, and has had a very substantial career as a soloist, playing this piece and many others over the years. He has been a colleague of mine since I arrived about 20 years ago, and he has, in recent years, become quite an active composer as well. He writes music in the more popular vein, which, interestingly enough, he has proven to us, by the quality of what he does, that writing pop songs is a lot harder than it looks. And I mean that in a very positive way. I mean, he's written many, many pieces and even constructed larger productions that are based on those things, those sort of popular-oriented songs. And what's been really fascinating is, here's a guy that, like many pianists, the bread and butter is the big war horses, and yet this other side of him is very light and very interested in text and how to get text and music to work together. And he's chosen to work in this, like I say, these more popular vein, sort of like Alec Wilder, or a person who has a real interest in serious music, but uses a popular approach.
Well, Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah, Bernstein, another one, is another one like that. So anyway, John has played this piece before, and he knows how to sort of make the piano sit up and beg, as far as pieces of this type. So I'm of course, it should be a very interesting concert, and I'm sure the collaboration will be very very entertaining. The piece itself, though, is a major work. I mean, it's one of the most popular in the entire repertoire.
Absolutely. It's one of the most beloved, well-known piano concertos ever written. It's certainly Rachmaninoff's most famous piano concerto. And in fact, it's so popular that it spawned several popular songs.
That's true.
The melodies were taken by pop composers,
right,
and incorporated into their songs. The most famous of which was Eric Carmen's All by Myself.
Right, 1975. Yeah, I even made a list just to make sure, or I have this list.
Why don't you tell us some of the other songs on there?
The hard part, though, is, the use of the second movement theme in Eric Carmen's piece is blatant.
Right.
Right. There's no denying it. He says that's what he admit. That's
he was a Rachmaninoff fan.
So the other thing, well, the other part to that is the music is so familiar that you can read into other pieces, that may or may not have been well, they may have been inspired by it, but they may not necessarily be quoting it. So, but this list includes several things by Frank Sinatra, even I Think of You and Ever and Forever. There's other sort of odd references to a group called Butterflies and Hurricanes. Or no, I'm sorry. It's hard. It's hard to sort out what these all mean. But there's several of these. The Gospelers, a song called Sky High. Not sure I know. I don't think I've heard that one. But other Sinatra tunes. Pretty interesting in the fact that, again, to me, it's hard to know whether it truly is that, or is it just one of those melodies or themes that he uses throughout the symphony that are just so familiar. Whether it's because you've heard that piece or because they resemble others. Hard to say whether they're inspired. But I guess the whole point of it is, if people hear this and it sounds familiar, they're probably right.
Right. It may be because they've heard the piano concerto
Exactly.
before, maybe they've heard it in some of these popular songs.
Yeah.
But in any event, it's a fantastic piece.
It is.
We have a fantastic soloist,
Yeah.
and this is one of those concerts you really don't want to miss.
Absolutely.